Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As some of you may be aware, this is the 5th in the series of Sargassum webinars that we've been having since last year. And I can see we've crossed over 100 participants, so we're expecting more to join us, but due to time, we may have to begin. And so welcome again, and I hope that we'll have an interactive session and as well to learn more from different experts that are on board today. So to beginning on the opening remarks, I'll welcome Leticia Cavallo. Leticia is the head of Freshwater Marine and Coastal Ecosystems branch at the United Environment Program. And Leticia, you have the floor to give your welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Milka, and my warm welcome to all participants to the 5th virtual Sargassum webinar, the last in the series, as Milka just mentioned. Hope you are all keeping safe during this challenging COVID-19 times, and we still have some careful period ahead of us, so please keep safe. First, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to colleagues at Cartagena Convention, Abidjan Convention, UNEP Science Division, IOC UNESCO, among other countries' representatives for co-organizing this webinar. UNEP is proud to host the GPA, the Global Program of Action for the Protection of the Marine Environment from Land-Based Activities. The GPA is currently focused around 3 key partnerships: marine litter/plastics, that is very much well known by many, wastewater, and the very important one, nutrients. For nutrients, the Global Partnership on Nutrients Management is one of these 3 GPA flagship partnerships, while also serving as focal point for the UNEFOR resolution on sustainable nitrogen management. I'm pleased to note that the GPNM's role in driving this series of webinars on Sargassum. So ongoing research shows that seaweed itself is not harmful. Floating Sargassum at the sea is beneficial as a unique habitat. However, it is the mass stranding of Sargassum on coastlines and ensuring the composition that is the highly detrimental to people, ecosystems, and economies. Notably, in 2021, an estimated 5.1 and 4.6 million metric tons of Sargassum have been observed in tropical Atlantic in January and February, respectively, with a stark increase to 10.1 million metric tons in March. This clearly shows the importance of conservation and restoration of our oceans and its entire ecosystem, as highlighted during the 2021 World Environmental Day on 5th June, behind of us, under the theme of ecosystem restoration, and also the 2021 World Oceans Day, also behind of us on 8th June under the theme, The Ocean, Life and Livelihoods. We take note of numerous Sargassum related projects and initiatives at global, national, multi-country and sub-regional levels, to explore opportunities for promoting synergies in forecasting barriers, collection and disposal, or harvesting and reuse. When it comes to policies and linkages, allow me to share that the challenge of Sargassum's influxes may be an opportunity to foster mutually beneficial transatlantic South-South cooperation. And this is precisely where we need to focus. While Sargassum issue includes impacted countries, territories from both the Caribbean and West Africa, scaling up the proposed regional governance mechanisms to global level can be initiated with a potential United Nations Environment Assembly UNEA resolution next year. This will represent joint aspirations of the international community to be taken up and help to coordinate funding, technical assistance to address this issue. I'm really excited to see the momentum building on Sargassum, especially with the next issue of UNEP's next foresight brief, which is titled Sargassum, Brown Tide or Golden Dew. UNEP is committed to to really support countries in developing policies and frameworks and early warning and prevention of Sargassum influx. In conclusion, my friend, I wish to thank you all partners again for joining organizing this webinar. Also, I thank all the participants for joining this webinar today from across the globe, especially from the Caribbean and the West Africa, while I am wishing you all a very stimulating webinar and looking forward to meet you again very soon. Back to you, Milka.
Thank you, Leticia, for those kind words and encouraging words. It's good to note that Sargassum is becoming a global challenge, and as well the potentials that are there to collaborate region-wise and globally, and even for the potential of a global resolution that could bring this to a consensus. So allow me to go to invite the next expert that we have on board, and that is Alexandra Caldas. He is the Chief of the Country Outreach Technology and Innovation in the Science Division, which sits in United Nations Environment Program. And Mr. Alexandra, you have the floor.
Thank you, Milka and colleagues. I have a very easy task this afternoon, which is to be as short as possible. But I'd like to start to congratulate the extraordinary work I can already anticipate by the discussion on such an important topic of the Sargasso and the impacts that can have on marine, but the human living beings. I think that's the most critical thing. Seconding Leticia's words, I really wish you have a very productive session in this webinar, the 5th in the series. I think this is an outstanding topic. Let me just have 2 points of remark. One is on the collaboration and the partnership, and this extraordinary opportunity to have South-South collaboration, bringing together in such a relevant topic as Sargassum, the West Africa and the Caribbean, but as a good example of partnership and collaboration across continents. And I think we have been over the last 50 years discussing big science topics, but sometimes it's good to have these on the ground discussions to understand the importance of collaboration and partnership, because it's not only on the impact side, on the science policy interface that is relevant. It's on making sure that the different stakeholders come together to partner and to find solutions for the problems that we are facing, for the challenges that we are facing. So my first point is on these nexus between the science policy and the partnership and the critical ingredient of partnerships that brings to the discussion and to the solutions for this kind of work. Of course, I think a lot has to be done in terms of near real-time monitoring and assessment, in order that these, together with the practitioners on the ground, can bring real value, on-time value and action for sorting solutions for the problem. And in this sense, that's why it is so important in overall frameworks as the SDGs, but also the data strategy of the UN and many others that insist so much on monitoring, assessment, and the direct link to policy and to action. So I think that these will be something that I would very much like to see discussed during the webinar. My other point is related to what Leticia just mentioned with foresight. I think, well, in a different arena, which is the current humanitarian crisis the humanity is suffering with the coronavirus, but in the topic, in such important topics as Sargassum, marine protection, preservation, restoration, I think it's even more relevant to discuss foresight, to try to understand how prevention, response, and recovery work together in order that it's possible to act in advance to the major challenge and problems that appear. And that's where foresight, I think, has as a fundamental work stream, as a way to go. And I'm so glad that immediately after this webinar and in the coming week, probably the UNEP is publishing this foresight on Sargassum. But this is a good example, just embryonic activity, I would say, to challenge the colleagues to work on a more permanent base in foresight, strategic foresight. I think there's one area, oceans, the life on oceans, not only human lives, but the ecological biodiversity. Foresight is one arena where it can give its contribution to help us to build these resilient solutions for the topic. So with these, without further ado, I just wish the colleagues, and I'd like to thank the teams. I know a fantastic partnership already, as mentioned by Leticia, was put forward to make this happen. I think it's time that even after the webinar, we take it as a good motive to stay together and to work collaboratively and in partnership to make this happen. So I wish you a very productive session, and over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, for those words, and thank you for as well stressing the importance of collaboration. And when you talk about the foresight, there's prevention, response, and recovery. So it's good as well as we go on just to keep in mind of that. And allow me to go to the next colleague, that is Lorna Ines. And Lorna is the director of Cartagena Convention. And Lorna, it's good to have you on board. Please welcome to give your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Milka, and good morning, colleagues. This collaboration has really been excellent, and I think it has gone way beyond what we originally expected in respect of the webinars. I think our partnerships and alliances have grown, as we've heard. And while I was thinking about these few opening remarks, I reflected on the previous webinars that were held, and noted that I just spent some time going back over some of the conclusions. And from the first webinar, it was noted that it is going to take a lot of work, but UNEP needs to really expand the possibility of collaboration with other UN agencies to achieve effective policies in mitigation and adaptation measures for invasive sargassum. And we talked about the need for a regional, a global plan for that matter, with respect to sargassum. And the conclusion of the second webinar, there were a few conclusions, and we focused on the need for data sharing and learning from each other, the importance of building strong networks and partnerships, the involvement of the private sector, government and NGOs in this fight against the sargassum, and the opportunity that is provided by the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development in building science and expert networks and partnerships. And of course, we also highlighted the strategic role of the regional seas, conventions and action plans as a medium through which collaboration can be strengthened at the regional level. And so with respect to the third webinar, by now we were definitely coming to the conclusion that this was a global problem, but that it's also very much linked, and in that same vein with the global issue, it's very much linked to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And during that webinar, we were able to link a number of those goals, even the economic and social goals like poverty and health and well-being and economic growth, to this issue of sargassum. And also we talked about mainstreaming the sargassum issue at the policy level with the upcoming UNEA 5 and the COPs of the two conventions. Finally, our previous webinar focused very much again on the partnerships and trying to build political will within the Caribbean and West African countries at the senior policymaker level, but also to make sure that we harness the knowledge that is available in scientific organizations and academia, allowing us to collaborate across multiple scales. And so we are here now at the fifth and final webinar, and I feel like so many of those conclusions and action points that we identified from the previous webinars are already on the way, because we have been running the webinar series, but along with that, we've been trying very hard to make sure that we begin to implement some of the key and specific and strategic actions that were identified during the webinars. And so I think that this series has undoubtedly strengthened and created new alliances, not just across the pond, the Atlantic, but I believe that we've opened new doors to regional and global cooperation, both within regions as well as among or across regions. And I think that now that we have also launched the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, that this is our challenge now, to link what we've talked about in relation to the UN Decade of Ocean Science to that decade of ecosystem restoration in this context of Sargassum. And I believe that that will also help us to achieve our objectives. So I'd like to join others in welcoming you to this webinar, and I think that we've really done a fantastic job in bringing experts together, and I look forward to hearing from you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorna. It's good to take note of what we've been exploring, various webinars that we've had, and it's also good to remind ourselves that this is the 5th series in that Sargassum webinars and the last one, and as well the take-homes that we can have in terms of collaboration, and as well taking up on the new engagement that we have, especially for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So allow me to go to the next speaker, and that is Jackie Abe. Jackie Abe is representing the Abidjan Convention, and it's good to have you, Jack, or you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Milka. I just want to congratulate UNEP for these initiatives, giving us opportunity on the West African region to collaborate and exchange view on what is happening in our beach. As the pelagic sargassum was known, blowing naturally in the Sargasso Sea, in the warm ocean of the North Atlantic previously. But the first serious recorded invasion of the sargassum along West African coast was known in 2011. They were seen along beaches spreading from Morocco to Gulf of Guinea. Satellite image show an unusual abundance spreading throughout the tropical Atlantic. In the context of the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals 13 and 14, and the United Nations negotiations on the new global agreement for biodiversity and areas beyond national jurisdiction, the Abidjan Convention Secretariat has initiated discussion with UNEP GPA to scale up intervention and play a lead role in providing needed technical support in response to the Sargassum infestation in West Africa. In this regard, the Abidjan Convention Secretariat is working in tandem with affected contracting parties and partners working on marine and coastal biodiversity management to provide a robust management strategy on this recurring phenomenon. What was done so far at the regional level? We have organized a certain number of workshops starting in 2015 in Sierra Leone, and the representative for Sierra Leone is one of our speakers in the region. He would tell us in detail what were the resolutions and were the initiatives for the region. So far, we have also followed at the regional level the meetings and workshops in Guadeloupe in October 2019 with the Caribbean side. Then we are part also in the collaboration West Africa, inside West Africa, during some series of UNEP, let's say, webinars. involving the most impacted countries like Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. And also, we went through this opportunity of collaboration between the Caribbean region and West Africa. And we had a certain number of concern from our communities on how to stop the sargassum coming to the beach. And that one is one of the main questions given to us that we have to solve. And it's not easy, of course, but when the sargassum is already on the beach, we have also to find a solution to clean the beach. But so far, what we do is a kind of sensitization, telling them that there are some also opportunities for the sargassum to use them as resources to produce compost that can be used in agriculture, and some result of activities giving us some other opportunities like fertilizers and so on. So I think we are trying now to sensitize our communities on the use. But the thing is that the occurrence of sargassum is not regular. Some years you have plenty, and some other years you don't have much. So when you target some activities like extraction for useful substances, we cannot really plan long-term activities. So we need, at this stage, to try to explain everything to the communities and in the countries, trying to do what we can just to clean the beach and to reduce the impact on local activities. That's what I wanted just to let you know on what's happening in the West African coast. Thank you, Milka.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you for the orientation of what is happening in West Africa. So allow me to go to our last speaker on the opening remarks, and that is Henrik. Henrik is the head of IOC, Science and Communication Center on Harmful Algae, which is hosted by University of Copenhagen, Denmark. Henrik, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Milka. So yes, welcome all attendees and colleagues on behalf of IOC of UNESCO, but also including our subcommissions for the Caribbean, IOCaribe, and Africa, IOC Africa, and also a joint research group we have with the Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research called Global Hab. And as the other speakers, we are very appreciative of the cooperation that has been reflected through this series of webinars and the partnership between agencies and regional partners. We are within our mandate in the UN family particularly focused at improving the understanding of the sargassum population dynamics, but as the basis for improved management solutions. And there is a lot of, just a second, something happened here with my computer. Don't know what it was. Sorry, I lost the screen. There's a lot of interest in sargassum, and maybe because it's still something relatively new, something people can see, it's macroscopic, and something that seems to become recurrent and can be addressed from a multidisciplinary perspective. And what is interesting also right now is that finally science and data are emerging, suggesting and starting to document that increased nitrogen availability is supporting blooms of sargassum, and thereby turning a critical nursery habitat into harmful algal blooms with all the effects that you know and that has been mentioned already by the rest of you in your introductions. We know that it has grown for centuries, for many centuries in nutrient poor waters in the open Atlantic. But now it's shown that since the 1980s that the nitrogen content of sargassum has increased by 35%. And the highest values are found in Sargassum that are growing close to coasts where there is coastal waters are influenced by nitrogen-rich terrestrial runoff. So these aspects is what is close to what our mandate is, and it's very important to fully understand and document what is driving Sargassum. So we hope from IOC UNESCO side that we can contribute to this great opportunity to work together on a common problem across the Atlantic basin. And as several of you have mentioned, let's explore the opportunities provided by the UN Decade to frame an initiative that can really deliver some of the solutions to these very complex problems. So I'm looking very much forward to listen to the presenters today. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. And I wish to say a big thank you for the team and my colleagues that were on these opening welcoming remarks. And allow me to welcome you to the part one of this webinar, and I'll welcome Joanna Crofi, who will be facilitating and looking on the opportunities for collaboration when we talk about Sargassum science, assessment, and monitoring. And just to remind our participants is that we have a question tab. So please keep on posting your questions in there. We'll be looking at it. And upon almost completion, we'll be answering your question, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Thank you so much as well, and I hope we have a fruitful discussion. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you very much, Milka. Let me join the earlier speakers in welcoming all of you warmly to this session. Indeed, it's been a whole journey, a whole year. I think last May is when we started this series of webinars, and as has been outlined earlier, we have done 4 of them already, running through the science, focusing on West Africa, focusing on the Caribbean, and finally, we are now going to look at the opportunities for collaboration, the Sargassum science, assessment, and monitoring. And we have 3 excellent speakers who are going to help us through this session. We expect that this session will be very interactive. So if you have any questions and or comments and inputs, you can first post them in the session, the chat session. We have Dr. Shirley-Ann Cox, Professor Kwesi Apieni-Addo, and Dr. Lygia Collado-Vaitis. 3 excellent speakers. We will start first with Shirley-Ann, who will be focusing on the Caribbean region. Shirley-Ann is not new to this webinar series. She's based with the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies at the University of West Indies, the Cave Hill campus. So let me not waste too much time on introduction, but rather give the floor to Shirley-Ann. Shirley-Ann, you have the floor.
The mic is off.
We need volume. I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yes. A pleasant good morning to everyone joining us. It is indeed an opportunity to speak to you this morning about a very important environmental issue, and even expanding on some discussions on South-South cooperation and collaboration with West Africa and the Caribbean. I'm going to highlight a few initiatives that we've been working on, and I've been privileged to be updated on how we are collaborating with colleagues. I know Kwasi is joining us on this session as well, and Cermes is now embarking on a project called SAR-Track. This is being led by the university in the UK, and they have been working towards producing an ensemble forecast system for the Northern Caribbean and West Africa. And I was informed that a paper was submitted yesterday that documents this process. And even beyond that, there is intentions to work on a bulletin to package the forecast system and communicate the implications of forecasts to impacted sectors. So quite a significant advancement on that end. And of course, you know, in the process of this and discussions among Caribbean and West African colleagues, we've realized that the sharing of experiences and best practices is very important. And even using our sub-regional forecast outlook bulletin for the Caribbean as an example of how the communication could be packaged and translated for the general public consumption. So one area of collaboration happening. We can also talk to the developments of remote sensing, and having been a part of the working group, Sargassum Corporation, SARCOOP for short, and the remote working group is really aiming to try to pool resources so that we can access some of the high resolution satellite images that are desperately needed for the forecasting system. And recently there is a document that lays out the plans for this collaboration and working towards publication soon. So of course it would be good to share this experience with our West African colleagues to see if in fact they can collaborate on that. As it relates to South-South cooperation, a session hosted by GeoPlanet last week, the All Atlantic Sargassum side event. But before that, we did have an online discussion with many of, you know, the faithful few, or the persons that I refer to that are working steadily on promoting this collaboration, about transatlantic cooperation and how some tools like the Sargassum Hub can be used to be that centralized platform of information that we can access, but also to help with the duplication of efforts, which continues to be one of the significant issues we're facing with Sargassum science, monitoring, and so on. Later this morning, when we talk about the white paper and how it, you know, brings that inventory of all of the programs, projects, and initiatives as it relates to Sargassum research and development, you would see there are, you know, over 10 plus monitoring platforms, for example. And perhaps it would be good for, you know, persons who are working in this space to see how best they could pool resources and possibly build and from best practices to see if in fact they're, not to say that we need one specific monitoring platform, but how could we make sure and maximize these platforms that we can really access the kind of centralized databases that we need, especially for validation of forecast. And we know that ground truthing and validation of forecast is very important, not only important for scientific information, but getting the stakeholders and policymakers to really trust some of the products that we are bringing out. So I believe these are, you know, the main areas that I see collaboration between regions could happen. You know, it helps us to optimize our strategies and plans. It could even help us save some money. So I think I'm going to stop here and allow my other colleagues on the panel to give their interventions, and I'm open for any questions if need be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eliane, for those very useful points and pointers that you have brought out. about the science and the monitoring of sargassum, particularly in the Caribbean region. Now, before I let you off the hook, there are two questions here. I believe we can just quickly let you react to them, even before we move to the next speaker. The first question is, how can the private sector get involved? I'm a board member for Recycling Partners of Jamaica. Is it something we have discussed? It is something rather, it is something we have discussed besides the plastic. And the second one, it says, do you now have the technology ready to monitor the sargassum bloom? And do we know the major factors causing it to be noticed? If academia are interested in this topic, who might provide the funding? So that's the second question. I think I will leave you to react to it whilst we prepare to take on our second speaker. Shellyan, okay.
For your questions, as it relates to how can the private sector be involved, I would also drop in the chat the link to the Sargassum Uses Guide, where there are lots of case studies of private sectors who are exploring the uses of sargassum, some quite advanced and producing products on a commercial basis, and others, you know, in initial stages of product development. But you can see not only private sector's interest in sargassum product development, but even in cleanup as well, as it relates to those kinds of innovative harvesting equipment that would be needed to remove or harvest the sargassum in a way that does not impact the environment. So I will drop the link in the box so that you can consult. We do have a directory of the entrepreneurs and sectors currently leading in this vein. I can also share other links and information so that you can consult. As it relates to the second question about the technology, it's quite advanced now in terms of the remote sensing products and the satellites, MODIS and Sentinel satellites being used to detect sargassum. There is the floating algal index that is used to detect it. You know, a lot of research went into actually detecting sargassum on the water versus, you know, other debris, and of course, Dr. Hugh and Wang are leading on this. So again, I will also try to provide some useful links to resources so that you can consult and see the development of technology in this area.
Okay, so thank you very much, Shellyan. We appreciate your answers to those questions and for you to provide some leads in the chat box. All of it will be put together and shared. We were expecting that Professor Kwesi Aduapianim will be the next speaker, but he is out in the field, on the lookout for sargassum, and it's ended up having some problems with the internet. So we will see how to connect with him if it's possible. But we will invite Dr. Lygia Collado Verdis to take the floor next. Lygia is a marine botanist working with the Florida International University and has been doing research on the tropical marine macroalgae on seagrass and the reef ecosystems in South Florida and the Caribbean. So Lygia, I'll give you the floor now so that you can make your contribution. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, well, first of all, thank you very much for all the work that you are doing, all the team and all of the speakers. I have been attending several of the webinars and they have been informative, but more than ever, bringing people together. And so I just want to remind everybody, we are in 2021 and the first arrival of sargassum was in 2011. So we're talking about 10 years already. And this is staying, it's not getting better, if we want to say that. The other point that I want to remind everybody that sargassum is a symptom of deep problems that were already addressed by everybody. So we're talking about the interaction of our lifestyle with our interaction and respect for nature and understanding that we cannot survive without having a healthy nature. We are part of nature. And I think that this is a huge call. We are, you know, beyond the boundaries. We are already passing the boundaries in which we can have a working planet. So if we understand that this is a symptom that is calling us to action and that action needs to be global. So we are now tackling a big problem that, you know, it's in the Atlantic, it's impacting the two different coasts and the Caribbean, so the west coast of Africa, the west coast of the Atlantic, and we keep talking about the Caribbean, but this is also continental Central America, Mexico are being affected as well as Florida, isn't it? We want to call the Great Caribbean. So I would like just to remind and give that context for all of us to keep going. And I think that because this is the last one, where we are heading after this fantastic work that you have been doing. So I was requested to think a little bit about the international collaborations. So since the first meetings that we were having, and on being a person dedicated to macroalgae, seaweeds, this was like, what is going on? These monsters are coming, and we know the algae and they are coming. But at the same time, we know that Caulerpa taxifolia was in the Mediterranean, Cladophora in Hawaii. We are having Rhodocobacteria in the Gibraltar spectrum. We are having many other problems. The thing is that we are not prepared as a society to respond to this. And that's where we're doing and what we need to do beyond, I think. So we have in these 10 years brought together people. Much more people are now interested, aware of what is happening. However, the people living in the ground, the fishermen, the people living in from tourists, their industries are being really impacted as well as their self-living. And we need to do something at the local, regional, and global level. And of course, at the it's going to be different institutions. So from the science perspective, there are several questions that some of you already addressed that we are advancing. We're understanding better the role of nutrients in this problem, but so far there are correlations. We have correlations, more nutrients, more nitrogen, more algae. But is this really happening? What is the metabolic process that is behind? We have a combination, stoichiometric combination between nitrogen, phosphorus, and phosphorus when it's lacking, because that's what is happening. We have higher levels of nitrogen, but not necessarily from phosphorus. The arsenic is going to come and be captured as a substitute for phosphorus. So we have then the metals problems. Essentially, we want to use the compost. We have organisms that are landing massively, not so enriched with nutrients themselves, but the massive amount is creating the big problems. So in the science, we need to collaborate in understanding not only correlations, but we really need to go beyond that and do the experiment input rates of the nutrients. We need to visualize this happening in Gulf of Mexico with the dead zone by the Mississippi, one of the largest amounts of sources for nutrients, Amazon, all of the other rivers, isn't it? Metals, which are the metals? How are they working? How they are going to be dissolved? How long does it take once sargassum is going to be decomposing to be released from the algae and go either to the sediments, going to the water systems, etc. So those are really questions that we need to address. Decomposition, biomass at the local level. So I think the West Indies is doing amazing and wonderful work to put everything together. And all my kudos, all my admiration they managed to get the funding to have a group dedicated for this. And that is what we need in the science. We are all struggling with our everyday life, trying to get some fundings to do a little experiment here, a little experiment there. And I think the role of these webinars is to bring us together and bring our resources together, because we don't have that many. The fact that you are having, working with European fundings, with the Caribbean, we need to support Central America. It's the same thing with the pandemic. Where are the vaccines going? Who are producing the vaccines? So we have to address this as a role model that is going to be helping us to address the problems that are coming, because this is going to come once Sargassum, when we reach a higher temperature. Sargassum doesn't like that temperature. So we're going to get another algae, another bloom, but we need to have that human society structure. We need to learn to collaborate. And when we're talking about collaboration and in all of these problems, nutrients, metals, decomposition, forecasting, local impacts, we need to bring society. So society means the private sector, the NGOs, but also the citizens. So citizens can be part of all of these. They can be part of the tracking, and we have developing different kind of programs or apps, very easy apps, in which we will. I don't know if you're looking at my screen or not. I don't know if you're looking just at me, or I have one slide that I wanted to show you if that's possible. From my screen, do I do that? I'm sorry.
We lost the screen.
Okay, can you see that screen now? So what in our, each one of us go and do what we know what to do, isn't it? So I'm very happy to have all of you organizing us. I am a psychologist, I am a scientist. So what I have been doing, and we have been doing as our first meetings in the Caribbean, and with Hazel Oxenford and Brigitte as colleagues, we say we need to create a forum. So SARCnet was created in 2018, I guess. We have more than 400 members. Please, something that is happening is that somebody's measuring nutrients with European funds in Martinique, but we are measuring in Florida, and somebody else is measuring in Mexico. These are expensive, and we need to understand that. Post your collaboration in SARCnet. So something that we need to work internationally is the webinars organized by governments, by NGOs, but also by everybody. So this is an invitation that international collaboration requires all of the different levels. There is this wonderful initiative of the Sargassum podcast is reaching to everybody. We need to have much more people from West Africa getting into those podcasts. So my invitation for all of that are listening and for all of that are organizing these webinars is that we need to think really out of the box. We don't have the time to keep thinking about the next decade. We need to do this now. And we need to learn to collaborate and not to compete. And that is going to be very important because we're talking about South-South. We need to talk about Central-Central, North-South, North-Central, North-South, all of the directions in which we're going to be addressing this. Because something that I would like to highlight here is that we have a fantastic opportunity if we manage to at all of the different levels and bring the voice that something has to be done something has to be done in the continents because they are causing these problems in the ocean. And bring the ocean as an ocean life that we depend on. And of course, that is at the oceanic level, but then we are going to be moving towards the coast. And in the coast, you're impacting the actual people that live and depend on those coasts. And that's where science is also very, very important. And science depends also on the people. I think something that was brought up in some of the questions are the recycling companies. I think they have an amazing role. We need to work with the recycling companies. We're trying to do that in Florida. It's very difficult for us to quantify how much biomass is getting into the actual beach, isn't it? If we want to create any kind of use, we need to do that. We need to work that with the recycling companies. They are the ones taking away all of the material. Some of them, in other cases, are the people. So I am not sure the time is closing, and I just want to say, try to come together. Let's have the forecasting, inviting citizens with the Epical Lake. We have sites for all of the Caribbean, but we can also need and have this at local level. And I hope this webinar will keep operating on levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lygia. Thank you for bringing out all those important points about collaboration, the science, and how a better understanding of the science will help us to be able to share knowledge. And also, you brought up the issue of funding, and I see there's a question that has been put out there. So I will bring up that question, how we have to share our resources, a network between the institutions, and bring the private sector and society. Think outside the box and collaborate and not compete, because it looks like this Sargassum challenge is more like the current pandemic, and until we tackle it everywhere, we have not made any progress. So we have to work together to get things in a better shape. Thank you very much. I still have not heard from Kwesi. I don't know if he's been able to join, but I think Jacques gave us a very good picture of what was happening in West Africa, and so we will take it from there. There is one question which was in the chat. Now, there's one which talks about, he says, one of the challenges of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is enhancement of multi-hazard early warning services. In the Western Tropical Atlantic, we have established a Safe Ocean Working Group, which will be seeking to focus on integrated MHWS. In planning for a virtual event on July 9th, we have surveyed the members on which hazards we should initially focus on. The top 7 in order of priority. I seem to have missed part of that question, unfortunately, but this is some information about a planned event on July 9th. So we will share this information. Thank you very much for putting it out there. And then the next one is about a proposal to set up the Gulf of Guinea Sargassum network. We are aware that there's a lot of work that has been done on the Caribbean side. We have the Sargassum net, and so it's a good opportunity for collaboration on these scientific networks, these institutions of research, academia, and so on. We need to collaborate and not compete so that we can build on and make progress. There is one proposal which has been put out in the chat. It's a proposal to set up the Gulf of Guinea Sargassum network. And it's basically putting out information. We will share this with you. In the interest of time, I think Dr. Kwesi Appiah and his friends in the sub-region, they are setting up a network. It's talking about the people in the sub-region who have been identified: Jacques Abe, Paul Lamine, Komo, Kofi, Dogbe, Clement, Ajumon, Bolaji, and so on. They want to set up this network so that they can link up with similar networks, particularly those across the other side of the Caribbean, and work together collaboratively. The question I think somebody has asked is, how do we get funding for such development? And I am glad that Lydia mentioned the issue of funding. After all said and done, science and everything together, we will need, when we have come up with a good plan, we need funds to be able to move forward. There is another one which says that, and I'll give you the opportunity, Lydia, to comment on this, but I just want to move quickly through them first. So there's another one about a project under our CESAR project, that's the Coastal Environment and the Sargassum Crisis at CNRS France Martinique, the Lesser Antilles. We are developing open source Sargassum product under Sentinel 2 and 3. That is also some good piece of information. And this is from a PhD student who I think originates from Senegal. So he says he or she is working on the biodiversity of marine macroalgae along the Senegalese coast and their associated habitats. And the question is Senegal part of the collaboration to take up the Sargassum challenge? I heard Dr. Abe list the countries that are party, but not Senegal. Do you have a representative? My counter question to this PhD student is, have you detected any Sargassum on the coast in Senegal? Anyway, I'll leave it to the experts to answer. And then the last one I will raise is why Sargassum is more noticed in the Atlantic Ocean, but not in the Pacific. Is there an ocean structural difference between the two oceans, or both oceans suffer the same degree of Sargassum bloom? So the science of Sargassum, we need to get it, all out there. I will invite first Lydia and then Shalian, if you also would like to make any comments about what I have already put out. Thank you.
Well, thank you. There were a lot of questions. I'm going to start with one that is relatively kind of easy in the Atlantic, not in the Pacific. So we have more than 358 species of the genus Sargassum. So from those, the majority of them are going to be benthic, attached to the substratum, and only 2 species are Sargassum natans and Sargassum fluitans that are forming this massive bloom. So they are already in the Pacific. We have the Sargassum muticum and Sargassum horneri that can cause problems, but they are going to grow and disappear after some months, isn't it? So they have a life cycle that is going to be cut. The Sargassum Sea in the north has been there for more than, I don't know, 1,500 years. It's a very long evolutionary process in which this ocean, so certainly they were benthic species and they were released and they formed that Sargassum Sea in the north. Due to the particular currents, the size of the continent, the size of the ocean between the 2 continents in the Pacific is huge, isn't it? And they don't have these particular currents that could be embedding and creating the Sargassum Sea. The currents changed in the 2010 and they were released and released some parts of them to West Africa. And then we have now the Great Belt between Brazil and West Africa, because we have the same conditions. We have currents that can keep them. The problem is that on top of those hydrological oceanographic conditions, then you have all of the nutrients, the temperature. So, but that doesn't mean that at any time you can have other Sargassum other species in the Pacific, but they tend to, the ocean is bigger. About the financing and sharing resources, I think that one of the examples is, well, science works that way. Indeed, we are always chasing for grants, and that's why I think in communication at this level, the SACNet in that way, that they're going to be called for proposals. We can, send by the SACNet and say, let's collaborate and put together this grant together. So that is the traditional way in which science works. You go for a call for proposals, you go to whatever agency, can be from your country or can be, from another international institution. I really admire what is happening in the West Indies, but they responded to a call of proposals together with several islands, and they were working together. And that's what is happening. It's the best place now to go and find support for everybody. And my total personal idea would be to just keep working with them instead of creating so many other websites, isn't it? But to bring and allow that website to grow. The other way is that there are going to be a lot of things that we need to do that those really not require a lot of money. That is communication. Because just through communication and technology, the apps, there is a lot of things that we can do. Have students, master's students, PhD students working together. I have a PhD student working with nutrients. I have another PhD student working with the diversity of macroalgae and the impact of sargassum in the trophic webs, isn't it? Those are questions with science. And science, we have the journals, but we need to go beyond that. And I don't want to take the microphone that much. So Shelley, you conduct that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I support all of your suggestions and recommendations. Just being very cognizant of the time, but I just want to add that we could be innovative with some of the ways we're looking for funding to support some of the innovations. We can consider blending finance mechanisms as well and exploring the role that private sector can play in, formulating interventions for this, environmental issue. We also need to consider other collaborations beyond private sector, but even sectors that we think aren't necessarily impacted that might have an interest. And hence the reason why I mean, at a session last week, I was talking about some of the institutional arrangements that have been, being developed over time, be it sargassum task forces, and even the involvement which helped in Barbados was the involvement of the military and, providing those kind of situation reports to help with cleanup forecasting. And I found that really interesting. I think too, as it relates to collaboration and sharing of experiences, I know as regionalists, we see in our minds, a regional policy or a blanket approach that can work to address things, but at the country level, there are ways and means that work in the local context and the nuances. And it would be good if countries could just, share how they've been coping and adapting. It might not be something very cutting edge, but it has worked. And these are the stories that we really need to hear to inform us as, interdisciplinary scientists and even, scientists like Lagia and those who are very specialized in certain areas. I think that is something that would be more fruitful as it relates to really helping the countries, to do what they're doing a bit better, but not trying to force something that they can't achieve in their context. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I'm not sure if we are through yet. Let me just steal some 2 minutes for us to look at this other one comment and two very simple questions, not difficult one. The comment is, and I don't know who we are. He says we are working to obtain a prebiotic sargassum to be used for animal and humans, being an alternative to reduce the amount of sargassum on the Mexican beaches. Okay, it's Mexico. Is there some international support for this type of research that we can apply? Again, to the issue of funding, a lot has been said about being innovative and working together. Then the other question is sargassum safe for land use application, like for compost with the heavy metals and other nutrients in it? And is there a platform or a hub to access information on projects, research, etc., on how to manage sargassum rather than just picking it up and dumping it somewhere else. I guess one of you can just quickly respond to this, these two questions, and I'll be handing over, ending the part one of.
Shelley, if you want, I go with the question about metals, and then you go with the others. Is that okay?
Sure.
Relate to.
So the decomposition and problems with the metals, that is something that all of us are studying. We know that all of when you analyze the content of metals in the algae itself is incredibly high, quite above any kind of any of the thresholds for any kind of consumption, animal or not even humans or compost. So we're very worried about that. That said, there are studies now conducted in which the decomposition is being analyzed. So those studies are showing that the liberation of arsenic is very rapid. It's very, very rapid. The thing is that you cannot just dump that compost directly whatever you are going to be putting. You need to invest in having a time in which the arsenic is going to be released, but you need to collect that. So that is some of the problems. The other problem is that we need, and more we're getting to the point in which 80% is going to be, let's say, it's like cholesterol, the bad cholesterol and the good cholesterol. Arsenic comes also in two forms, organic and inorganic. So one of those forms is the good and the other one is the bad. The thing is that it seems that the bad is the highest one. So we still are in the process. There are so many other things that sargassum can be used for, and I will, encourage, at least at this moment, until we're completely sure and have at least technology or methods or telling you need to leave your sargassum for 3 days before you can use it for compost. So advances are there, but still not totally fully comprehended.
Yes, and
Thank you,
I want to
Lilian.
Yes, yeah. I want to encourage, following on from Lygia's intervention, to consult the uses guide. There are sections that speak to compost and, the constraints and challenges as well. And they are in the guide. I know it may be a lot to get through, but, you can consult the guide and get more information on that. I think too, another important point as it relates to, testing and investigating chemical composition is at the science policy interface, we need to think about how we are going to go about building the capacity of people within the region to actually do these tests and have the labs and equipment in place to really support product development. And we know it's a gap right now, and it's quite expensive now to send samples overseas to be tested. But looking towards the future, we would want to build up that capacity so we can do those tests here.
Okay.
Especially when is amazingly important, and I think that's some of the things that we can work without a lot of financial needs. We can do workshops online, building capacity. And that's exactly what I'm saying. When we know who is doing what labs are measuring nutrients, might be cheaper for you to send to Florida than to England, isn't it? Whatever, all of that. So this is an example for everybody that is asking about financing, building capacity nowadays. And the work that these webinars are doing is exactly that. So I will email you guys.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lygia and Shelley-Ann. Thank you for the time you have spent and for those very good responses to the questions. To all our participants, we will share the questions with you, and all the comments also will be made available. I think there's one last issue about whether merchant vessels cannot be used. This is all about being able to collaborate and finding innovative ways, inviting the private sector, getting in place some institutional arrangements, cross-sectorial collaboration, and all of that brings about a more forward-looking way of handling the situation. So I will close this part of the webinar and invite my colleague from the Caribbean, Chris Corbin, to take over looking at collaboration at the policy level, mainstreaming at regional and global levels. We are now moving from science to action. Chris, you have the floor. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And again, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world to this 5th webinar on Sargassum. And before introducing our next group of speakers, I wanted to bring sincerest apologies on behalf of my colleague, Ms. Ileana Lopez, who has been almost a standing presence at all of the webinars to date. She is responsible for our Marine Biodiversity Program at the Cartagena Convention Secretariat and has really been our champion on this issue of Sargassum. I am actually responsible for the Marine Pollution Program, but I think that demonstrates that integration that we were talking about. Sargassum also has links with marine pollution, with the impact of nutrients, and as you've heard also with regard to monitoring and detecting what levels of heavy metals they might be in Sargassum. We always have said that we need the good scientific data in order to base our policy and decision making, and the next set of discussions are going to focus on that, as Joanna mentioned. And we have two speakers, Mr. Paul Lemaire from Sierra Leone and Senor Jose Luis Fuentes, who will give their perspective as it relates to collaboration, mainstreaming of policy as it regards to Sargassum, and perhaps how that can be upscaled to the regional and global levels. We encourage persons, as they did in the last session, to please continue to put your comments and so on in the chat, and I will try to monitor that as best as possible. But Paul, happy to hand over to you. You have the floor.
His mic is off.
Paul, I suspect your mic might be off still.
All right. Okay, it's okay now.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Paul Elabin, and I work with the Environment Protection Agency, Sierra Leone, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Natural Resources Management Department. Milke, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, Paul. Yes.
Okay, I can't see the screen from here, from my own computer.
It's showing the first slide, so you can move to the next.
Okay. All right. So I want to thank UNEP for organizing this event, and also for all of the speakers and the participants who also could afford to attend this webinar today on this important topic, Sargassum. So I just need to oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay, all right, thank you very much. So, as Mr. Jakabi mentioned, Sierra Leone was also one of the affected countries, where it's already one of the affected countries. And we also started experiencing the invasion of Sargassum in 2011. And in 2015, Sierra Leone hosted the first expert group regional meeting in Sierra Leone. And one of the main resolutions of that expert group meeting was the elaboration of a regional strategy under the framework of the Abidjan Convention. So my focus on this presentation will be to look at that regional convention and see what are the lapses or what are the things that actually could trigger collaboration between West Africa and the Greater Caribbean region. So given that the Sargassum invasion is being driven by several factors, so we all understand that it has to be dealt with through a regional approach, and there could be also a common strategy, even though we are from different regions, but there could be a common strategy in addressing the impact. With that, we'll be able to evaluate those strategies at the end of the day. Then because of the extent of the impact or the invasion of the Sargassum, also it could be meaningful to have a transatlantic initiatives, being implemented to mitigate impact. Then also countries that are worst affected by the Sargassum phenomenon could also take steps to integrate this problem into their national plans or national agenda through policy planning and programs. So then at this very moment, given that every country is also trying to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goal, we want to look at building initiatives, to transform the problem to economic benefit, for which many countries are far ahead of many other countries in West Africa. So these are some of the existing initiatives from literature, or there are some from some publications I read. I understood that there are already existing structures in the Caribbean. Just when Shelley was talking, there is already Sargassum task force. There's a platform or hub to access information, some quarters. And this was also emphasized by Christopher, so these are existing initiatives, and they are proving very, very productive. Surveillance operations, and then also where now the Sargassum issues is also being used to bring economic benefits to the Greater Caribbean region. I remember our friend from St. Lucia, this guy who owns this company, Algas Organics, visited Sierra Leone during in 2016, 2017. So there was this effort to come and establish Sargassum cottage industry in Sierra Leone, and that could have been done through a public-private agreement. But that has still not been materialized. But these are some of the ways that I think could also promote collaboration among the region, between the region. So in West Africa, sometime just following the expert group meeting that was held in Freetown, then the Abidjan Convention took some steps to consult and develop a a regional strategy on alien and invasive species. So as you can see on the right, that is Mr. Abu Bamba, who is the regional coordinator for the Abidjan Convention during the validation meeting in Liberia of that regional strategy. So, but there are still some issues, even though the regional strategy has the potential to contribute to ways and means in addressing the Sargassum problem in West Africa. But following the validation of that strategy, there are still some issues or some problems that we have not been able to address. Proper tracking and forecasting still remains a problem, and coordination issues could also pose a problem, because we're expecting that since the regional strategy was developed under the Abidjan Convention, then the convention was supposed to have taken measures or lead role in coordinating the implementation of those strategies at national levels. So whether there is any regional programs, this is not too clear, but I know that there are regional projects being implemented in West Africa, and there could also be a kind of a potential or opportunity to create synergy between some of the strategic objectives of that strategy into those programs. Then even at national level, we still lack those management procedures, because, well, for one reason or the other, this was a strategy. This was not a legally binding document or instrument. So we still have to encourage countries to take ownership, to also take steps in realizing the goal of that strategy. So what are some of the opportunities? In fact, this is the core of this presentation. What opportunities do we have in establishing collaboration between West Africa and the Greater Caribbean region? So the Abidjan Convention is a regional convention which has the mandate to adopt measures once it relates to coastal and marine management. So there could be a possibility to bring that strategy or to transform that strategy into an additional protocol. Then that will become legally binding on countries within the West Africa region, or even within the Abidjan Convention region, to take a bold step in addressing the menace. And how we can also incorporate data acquisition and information management in existing programs. There is this West Africa Coastal Area Management Program. It's projects in West African region. So this can also help in facilitating collaboration among countries, and also between the West African region and the Greater Caribbean region. Then there are, well, in my country, there is ongoing policy development on the use of sand that is being mined from the coastal area. So where we have in many countries that Sargassum could be used as an alternative to alternative construction materials, we think this could also stand as a great opportunity, to manage the impact of Sargassum in our region. Then sharing of knowledge, innovation, and best practices. I remember somebody mentioned that there is, I think in the Caribbean region, there's a platform for information, a hub for information. So that could also help. If we have a kind of hub where people from our region, West African region, can also learn from the best practices in the Caribbean, because it is undoubtedly clear that the Caribbean people or countries are far ahead in managing these Sargassum issues. Then I think one of the issues that came up during one of the presentation of my co-panelists was that the issue of heavy metals and other contaminants. So the opportunity here is that many countries within the Abidjan Convention region have ratified the LBSA protocol, and if this one is implemented well or it's been enforced well, then this can also contribute to addressing the problem of sargassum, because many researchers have pointed out that the bloom of sargassum could also be the factor of nutrient, and also because we now want to transform the sargassum into usable product, but the limitation there could be maybe whether there's some presence of heavy metals. So if there are monitoring protocols on the sargassum, which is a common or standardized monitoring protocol, this could also help to build a synergy and also a collaboration opportunity between the two regions. Then exchanges through scientific forum. For instance, during UNIA, I remember, I think it was either the second or the third UNIA, a presentation was made at that UNIA on the sargassum. Then that was actually at the time we started facing a serious threat from the sargassum. So I think this could also trigger collaboration between affected countries and between affected regions. And then where we also try to implement or to try to replicate those best practices from regions that are now doing very, very well in managing sargassum. Then where we have regional projects that relates to coastal zone management, I think we can also try to factor in some of these strategic responses, and so as to manage the sargassum infestation and also the impact on the coastal and marine environment. So I want to thank you. Because of time, I will end here and wait for any intervention or comment from my colleagues. I thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that excellent presentation and some of the experiences coming from Sierra Leone and West Africa in particular. And of course, as a sister convention to the Abidjan Convention, we do recognize the importance of those regional frameworks. I would now like to invite Jose Luis to just to introduce yourself first, and please, you have the floor for the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Chris. And let me show my, it's already there, my presentation. Well,
yes, we're seeing it.
Oh, great, brilliant. Well, good afternoon for our colleagues from Africa, and good morning for our colleagues from the Caribbean. Thank you very much for the invitation for the United Nations Environmental Program and also the Caribbean Environmental Program. My name is Jose Luis Funes. I am an environmental lawyer, and I've been working on the Sargassum phenomenon here in Quintana Roo. Quintana Roo is the state who's in front of the Caribbean Sea in Mexico. Is where Cancun and the Mayan Riviera is a very, very important, famous touristic resort here in Mexico. And in 2000 and let me see, and the title of this presentation is the Sargassum Challenge, the Opportunities for Collaboration. Hold on. These two pictures, I took it in this morning in Playa del Carmen in the Mayan Riviera. And we can see the people from the municipality working in order to pick off the sargassum of the beach. And also on the other side, we have got a picture of the Playa del Carmen resorts with the sargassum bloom. No, the unprecedented blooming of pelagic sargassum across the equatorial Atlantic is from in Mexico. We have these results since 2015. In that time, I was the representative of the Ministry of Environment in Quintana Roo, and I work very, very close with two important researchers, specialists in Mexico, Dr. Brigitta van Tussenbroek, and Dr. Rosa Rodriguez. And we work in the elaboration of technical guidelines for the removal of sargassum of the beach and in the marine environment, so to not affect the marine life, so such coral reefs and seagrasses. We don't have an adequate legal framework, so we coordinate these guidelines to face this massive arrival of sargassum without affecting the marine life. The guidelines ensure the coordination with the different authorities, the local and the federal ones, the national ones, and also the community and the private sector, and also to not affect the tourism and fisheries activities. Well, the massive arrival of sargassum, hold on, the next one. The summer, as I said, the summer of 2015, the Mexican Caribbean witnessed the first macroalgae bloom record. And also in the summer of 2018, we had the worst scenario until now. In the map that in your left, you can see this important. Well, we have two species of sargassum. There are many species, but the two species that we are facing is the Sargassum fluitans and Sargassum natans. Solid pelagic and spend their entire cycle in the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. We can see between the West Africa and the wider Caribbean, this great Atlantic Sargassum belt. It's different from the Sargassum Sea that we used to know a lot for the history when Christopher Columbus in 1492 described it on the books. This is a different one. And the image on our right, we can see this connection between this, the West Africa and the wide Caribbean with all of this. The impacts of sargassum, well, it's all in tourism, in fisheries, health, in finance, and also in the most important thing, in environmental impacts. Well, in Quintana Roo, it's a state in front of the Mexican Caribbean, is famous for its beaches and crystal clear waters. However, since 2015, we have received large quantities of sargassum seasonally. We can see in this chart the booming of 2015 and also 2018, and now we have got the 2021. Which was the strategy of the authorities in the first 3 years? The Mexican Environmental Authority issued guidelines for sargassum removal from the beach, and also protecting, of course, the sea turtle nests. The guidelines were also issued to collect sargassum in the marine environment. And we have got, we are part of the second largest coral reef barrier after the Australian, is the Mesoamerican reef barrier. It's very, very important, and we have got in our sea these important marine ecosystems. So the coordination between authorities of the 3 governmental levels, as you know, Mexico is a federal government system, like Nigeria, for example, or Brazil, and the United States. So it was really, really important, the coordination between these different levels of authorities. Also, we have marine protected areas. For example, in the Mexican Caribbean, we have got now the reserve of the biosphere, the Caribe Mexicano, the Mexican Caribbean, is very large and is a marine protected area to preserve the rich marine biodiversity as coral reefs, seagrass beds, and mangroves. Quintana Roo also represents almost half of the income obtained from tourists to the country. So economically, it's very, very important, our state. So after 2018, changed the strategy with the Mexican Environmental Authority, issued provisions to present emergency notice regarding environmental impact assessment. This environmental policy really important because we are in protected areas. So the academic sector proposed the creation of a technical legal standard in Mexico called NOM, Norma Oficial Mexicana. This technical legal standard is we are working on it. We don't have now this standard, very important, because it's really important for the legal framework that we have to take to make all of these sections. No? However, this standard was not created and the guidelines were only updated in this year. Since 2019, the Mexican Navy, SEMAR, Secretaría Marina, is the head of the actions. No? And the local government, the state government, and the municipalities work coordinate with the federal authorities. We can see these pictures, how they work to remove the sargassum on the beach, and also how they involve the Navy, the Mexican Navy, and also the type of structures and in order to remove from the beach. Sargassum impacts, of course, first of all, tourism, the beach erosion, the bad odor, bad scenery, fisheries, of course, damage to vessel engines, decline in fisheries, and environment, significant damage to critical coastal ecosystems like coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass beds. I want to put some special underlying these environmental impacts because, for example, now in the Mesoamerican reef barrier, we have this disease for some corals. We're really concerned about this. There's a stony coral tissue loss disease, and it's affecting a lot these important marine ecosystems. Also we have got the seagrass, the decaying sargassum results in hypoxia and the deterioration of water quality, killing seagrass beds and fauna. For example, we have this study, this paper, really important paper from Dr. Rosa Rodriguez and other Dr. Brigitta van Tussenbroek with the element concentrations in pelagic sargassum along the Mexican Caribbean coast, really important paper. And also, of course, the damage of the sea turtle nest along the shore. So what's the idea of this technical standard? Well, we can regulate, first of all, with the sargassum analysis, we can go to the monitoring and statistics, and with this information, we have to containment the marine barriers that we use now in the Caribbean Sea. After that, we have to collect it in the sea and the beach in order to get the sargassum disposal on land and on the landfills or special sites to put the sargassum disposal, and after that, the industrialization. The idea of this technical standard that many academic scientists and NGOs were supporting is because with this standard we can have a real clear and a legal framework to work in all these stages of the sargassum in front of the sargassum action. Well, the sargassum policy mainstream, well, in the Mesoamerican reef major region, we have to work more close. For example, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, the countries with which we share this Mesoamerican reef barrier. Also, we have to go to the wider Caribbean region, for example, the Cartagena Convention and its protocols. Also work, and I think this is a great example, work with the countries in the Atlantic coast of Africa with the Abidjan Convention. Also, we don't have to forget the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, and its protocols, of course. And finally, well, of course, the Paris Agreement of climate change, because we have to hitting effects of climate change. As a final remarks, I would like to say that we need better coordination between authorities, the national ones, of course. A clear legal framework must be created, as I told you before, the standards, technical standards that can regulate all the process and with all the authorities involved, and also is legal. I mean, we can work on enforcement in that way. Also with priority to the marine environment. This is really important. Of course, the tourist activities, the fisheries, the productive activities are really important, but all depends of our marine environment, the health of our marine environment. More collaboration with the regional countries, as I told before, from the Mesoamerican Reef, the Weather Caribbean, with the countries of West Africa, and also the other regional and global institutions, because we have to see in this point one really interesting point, that transboundary harm, that we have to work more in that sense, no? Of course, and many questions going to the funding is really necessary for more research, encourage and support research, of course, and encourage social participation. The civil society, NGOs, academic sector, the private sector, they are working really hard, and they want to generate more strong links with the authorities, not national and of course international. Thank you very much for your attention, and that's my email if you need anything else, more information. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much, Jose Luis, and thank you for sharing those ideas. I'm conscious that we are running a little tight for time, but I think there are maybe a couple of points it would be useful to emphasize, and then a question I'd like to pose to both of you. So from the perspective of UNEP particularly, we also need to see how we can, I guess, maximize on those decision-making mechanisms that exist. At the global level, we have the United Nations Environment Assembly. At the regional level, both in West Africa and the Caribbean, we have meetings of ministers of Latin America and the Caribbean, meeting of ministers of the environment that have actually put the issue of Sargassum on their agenda. And then more at the regional level, we heard from Paul about the importance of the Abidjan Convention. You, Jose Luis, emphasized the role of the Cartagena Convention. One point I wanted to add is we're also seeing the collaboration with the fisheries management organizations, because fisheries is so heavily impacted. But I wanted to pose a question to both of you. The issue of Sargassum definitely needs the involvement of many different ministries and sectors apart from environment. And we had a question also about the role of the private sector, since some cases national policy is also influenced by private sector. Do you have any suggestions as to how, or maybe the direction that's being taken in Mexico, in Sierra Leone, to bring together the different sectors so that we can have more informed national policy? It's not only based on one sector or another. So Paul and Jose Luis, we welcome your thoughts on how that could be done, or any recommendations on how that could be done. Over.
Please, Paul.
Can I go first? Okay. Thank you very much for the question. Well, in Sierra Leone, what I have seen is that the Sargassum issues is not being handled just by one ministry or by one agency. We have various institutions, government, civil society, and private sector who have different mandates. And the government sector, we have the Ministry of Tourism, and the tourism, they have the mandate to ensure that the beaches are well kept. So at the instance where we have deposition of Sargassum on the beaches, so it is the responsibility of the National Tourist Board and the Ministry of the Tourism and Cultural Affairs to ensure that the beaches are clean. In fact, now when they do develop their annual budget, so they include this cleaning aspect in their budget. And we also have the private sector, but the problem here has been that the coordination aspect is what is somehow lacking. So private sectors are also very, very interested in this phenomenon, and they have been trying to do some trials and also to do some tests, and this has been very, very successful. In fact, when we had the expert group meeting, one company showcased some of the trials they have done. So it is also, they are also very relevant in policy making decision and also effort in addressing innovations. So maybe my colleague will want to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Well, in my personal point of view, I think the environmental authorities in the different levels, the national ones and the local ones, they have to put the most important role, because is more linked to the climate change effects and also the protect of the marine biodiversity. I mean, that's the main point, and we have to focus on that. And also we have to need the coordination and the support of different entities, from the Navy, from tourist authorities, economic, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, etc. And also, of course, with the coordination very, very close with the authorities closest to the people. I mean, the state governments and municipalities, because they have the effects directly. And also, what about the private sector? The private sector is an important actor, and for example, in our case, for example, the tourist sector is really, really important to get involved in the beginning, and also NGOs and the academic sector. I mean, we can build this framework with a clear legal standards, that we don't have until now. We have some guidelines that's really important to work on it, but we have to put in another stage, more stronger, because if you have got these clear standards, technical standards, with a legal clear framework, you can give more confidence to the investment, because we need a lot of investment, private, public, international, for international funds, etc. But we have to be more clear in our legal framework. If we don't have this framework, it's going to be really difficult to take some economic resources from the national level or international institutions. So it's a real challenge. But the other thing, and the last, is we have to be more close to this kind of forums, to this kind of meetings. With this, we can learn from the experience of the other countries in the wider Caribbean, in the Western Africa, and with the institutions and the scientists that they gave us the keys to solve this problem, and this phenomenon. I think between everybody, right?
Thank you so much, Jose Luis, and again, thanks to both of you for your feedback. I know we could continue this discussion for another hour, but we really do appreciate. And in a way, I am handing over from myself to myself, because I'm responsible for the next short session, which is a really proud moment for us at the Cartagena Convention Secretariat in launching a Sargassum white paper. As has been mentioned, there's been a lot of work ongoing in the region, on the research side, on the monitoring side, several regional platforms, several scientists working together. And this Sargassum paper is really an effort to document and bring all those experiences together. So without any long introduction, I'd like to move directly to, I think it's going to be Anna Karima, who might be presenting the paper itself, but thanks to both Shelly Ann Cox and Anna Karima Degia, who helped pull this paper together, and we are really proud of this as an activity moving forward. So over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Chris, for the introduction. We're very happy to be able to present on the behalf of the Cartagena Convention. And, we're very happy to share the launch of the white paper. We're going to allow you to scan the QR code at the end of the presentation so you can download the white paper. And, this morning, so much has been said about the background context as well as the sectors impacted. So I'm just going to really give you a preview and how we package that information and use simplified language to get the problem statement, how it's impacting sectors, and how we can explore opportunities across to our stakeholders and policy makers. So just a little look of the presentation in terms of the areas we're going to cover, from the background to gap analysis and recommendations. And here you can see the gorgeous photo being featured. This was a map in Belize, September 4th in 2018, the worst year to date. A photo taken by Tony Rath, a nature photographer, but I thought it was really impactful and we recommended it to be on the front of the white paper. And I think too that sargassum, if we look at it as a catalyst for innovation, it is a muse for artistic pursuit. So we wanted to integrate that into the white paper as well. And here you can see the table of contents, beginning with the problem statement down to the appendices. And in the appendices, you can find an inventory of all monitoring, forecasting initiatives, as well as projects, programs, and initiatives that are, well, some of them just beginning, over 26 of them specifically. And this is a living document, I would say, because even since we've reported and this has been published, we are even learning about more initiatives and some today as well. And here's a link where you can download the white paper, and I'll let you scan it again a bit later. So my colleague Letitia in the beginning did allude to the fact that pelagic sargassum is beneficial, but of course it's the massive influxes that are creating and is significantly impacting sectors. Even at sea too, the sargassum is fouling fishing gear and impeding navigation. So of course it's this amazing habitat, but it is impacting people, livelihoods, and economies. And it's a very weighty and complex problem, and we would have used the million metric tons from the USF Outlook Bulletin to create this graph to show the amounts of sargassum over time. And you know, it is this kind of time series that policymakers need to inform their decisions. So we know 2018 was the worst year to date, and 2021 is actually coming in a close second. And these are the impacted sectors, the biophysical and the socioeconomic. And specific impacts across these sectors are also articulated. You can see from public health here to direct cost. We know in 2018 it was estimated that cleanup costs in the Caribbean was over $120 million alone, and I'm sure that's an underestimate. Of course, we know that impacts are more well understood than causes, and you know, we're still, and if you follow the literature, we're still investigating the causes, and there are lots of undetermined factors. So, you know, we would have summarized some of this and illustrated in a causal pathway. Here you can see it starting with the fact that sargassum exists elsewhere, and then it was transferred to the new consolidation region that you can see here. There's persistence and proliferation, and then separation and transport into the Caribbean. Now, this pathway is also illustrated in this systems thinking diagram, and we would have developed this diagram in the process of developing the UNEP foresight brief, which we will show briefly later. This diagram is not in the white paper, but we show it here to really illustrate how the causal pathway links to the interventions and those factors that contribute to the causal pathway. And then categorizing these interventions into a strategy framework. So here you can see adaptation, mitigation, policy development, and coordination, and of course, each intervention categorized. We went also to link to the blue economy sector, which is, of course, you know, an emerging sector. And, you know, many persons have alluded to the fact that sargassum opportunities or product development should be seen as blue growth initiatives and integrated into blue economy strategic frameworks. So we present this framework as a way of categorizing those interventions, and as well to suggest how it could be operationalized. And speaking about interventions, there's so much going on. In the chat, we're learning about more, but we're summarizing some of the interventions here, and the appendices of the white paper have more detailed short descriptions as well to the links where you can access this information. So over 10 forecasting initiatives, monitoring barriers, again, meetings and events and webinars, over 50 of them that we have seen by scouring the internet and so on, that have sargassum as a focus. And of course, it's a living document, so it would be updated over time. And then we constructed this timeline to show some of these symposia, conferences, workshops over time, beginning in 2015, all to 2021. You could see here when we finished reported in January. Since then, there have been about 5 sargassum related events. So I think the real benefit is that we have put all this information in one place so that you can see what has been happening, the interventions, and then you can also look at the gaps. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague and friend Karima Dega. She's going to take us through the next few sessions.
Thank you, Shelley. Just making sure everyone can hear me. Just making sure everyone can hear me all right. Thank you, Shelley. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you on this and with UNEP. I'm going to take you through fairly quickly in the interest of time, but as Shelley said, this overview, this flavor of what's in the white paper is really just to encourage you to go and download and have a look for yourself. So you've heard Shelley talk to us on the causes and the effects and the organizing framework used to categorize the various types of interventions. In this work, in the white paper for us, another key input for strategizing the sargassum response was a situational analysis of the Caribbean as one of the impacted regions. The region is not nearly as homogeneous as it is sometimes assumed. It is diverse and geopolitically complex. It contains the most SIDS of any region in the world. This is a small island developing states. This is important here because the impacts of sargassum are not uniform across the region, and the interventions must be customized for countries and territories to their specific circumstances. So to encourage critical analysis that recognizes these variations, we identified some important distinctions between the insular Caribbean and the continental Caribbean that will underlie variations in impacts and response capacity. Next, Shelley. Thanks. We also developed a stakeholder map with an organizing framework that broadly categorizes stakeholders as those who are responding to sargassum as a risk or a hazard versus those who are responding to it as an opportunity, of course recognizing that there are some who fall into both categories. Within each broad category, the stakeholders are further categorized by sector. The stakeholder map is large enough to span a couple of slides, and we won't get into any detail on it, but the point here is that this organizing framework can be used or adapted to map stakeholders at sub-regional or national levels as well, or you can simply use the Caribbean regional level map in the white paper as it is if you want to see who the stakeholders are and what their interests are. So we can, exactly. So having synthesized causes and effects, as well as a regional situational analysis and the state of the response thus far, you heard Shelley talk about all of the different interventions. We undertook a gap analysis and developed recommendations to address those gaps. This is also organized according to the strategy framework with headings of forecasting, collection and disposal, harvesting and reuse, etc. So it follows that same structure. And so from here, I'm just going to highlight a few key findings and recommendations. We won't go over every single thing. Next. One key recommendation that we make in response to the regional diversity and variation in the Caribbean is and variation in impacts is the use of exposure and vulnerability mapping techniques to assess the spatial distribution of impacts, to inform response planning and allocation of responses. And so we're showing here an example from Barbados. We do know that there's some other similar work ongoing, at least in Jamaica, and this spatially explicit information can really help with allocating resources and optimizing the response so that attention goes where it needs to go within country. Next. So as we look at opportunities, one of our key findings is that at this stage, while efforts to explore the potential opportunity are certainly underway and there's a great deal of interest, the reality at this current stage is that sargassum influxes remain more of a hazard than a benefit until certain key issues are resolved. So following from that, next, to support recommendations, we've recommended further critical analysis of sargassum value chains to support investment planning and decision-making in sargassum valorization initiatives. And in the white paper, we present a generic schematic of a value chain to illustrate the general stages and issues to be addressed throughout that value chain, so that issues to do with feasibility, quality control, environmental and social impacts of the industrial operation itself can all be assessed and understand where those fit into that value chain process. And finally, from me, we also include policy recommendations, key amongst those being recommendations for alignment with existing governance mechanisms in the wider Caribbean region. And here we specifically called out the Caribbean Large Marine Ecosystem Plus interim coordinating mechanism, as well as recommendations for transatlantic, especially South-South collaboration between impacted territories in the Caribbean and West Africa. Of course, the work of UNEP, including this webinar series, has played an important role in promoting inter and intra-regional coordination. So that gives a nice segue where I'll hand back over to Shelley, who will wrap up and speak a little bit about the role of the Cartagena Convention in the strategy.
Yes, thank you so much, Karima. And the contribution of the Cartagena Convention to the strategy framework that was illustrated before is as it relates to cooperation, data, planning, and policy, as well as capacity building and outreach. We spoke about transatlantic cooperation and of course, linking to the Abidjan Convention and emphasizing the need for the one UN approach to building synergies and promoting coordination and efficient use of resources. Now, this is, of course, more information is outlined in the white paper. I'm just going to give in a brief overview. And finally, general recommendations. Of course, we notice in the literature different types of references to sargassum influx events. Some people may refer to it as inundations, but a general recommendation coming out of the Science and Technical Committee meeting earlier this year is the use of the term sargassum influx is recommended when addressing challenges and impacts posed by large landings. And the Caribbean Environment Program Secretariat, another recommendation is to increase collaboration and joint program between the SPA and LBS protocols, particularly in the context of the SPA Sargassum Working Group. And two other recommendations as it relates to the SPA protocol is, further cooperation with relevant organizations and initiatives to minimize duplication. And, what was outlined earlier in terms of leveraging existing governance arrangements that already address other marine issues to offer that coordination for the sargassum influx. We are also very happy to inform you that we would have worked on some short briefs. So if you don't have the stamina to go through the document, it is not quite long, but there are some briefs with some key messages and, of course, advice as it relates to the type of policy actions that will be needed to address this issue. So there is a 4-page policy brief and then shorter sector briefs specifically tailored to private sector, civil society organizations, women and youth. And then, of course, the UNEP Foresight Brief is another product that is based on the white paper. We're just going to give you a brief overview of this is the policy brief. This is one tailored to entrepreneurs and small, medium enterprises. Civil society is a 2-pager. Another one looking at engaging women and youth in sargassum influx management. And the Foresight Brief, which will be officially published very soon, Sargassum, Brown Tide, or Golden Jewel. And here we present, you know, some interesting ideas as it relates on future advancements. We also know the emergence of the use of sargassum, leveraging that and the carbon sequestration aspects in blue carbon, and that is outlined as well. This is a Cartagena Convention product, and it has been produced in association with other UNEP colleagues. Went through an extensive review process internally as well as externally. We got reviewers from University of the West Indies, University of Ghana, Sargasso Sea Alliance, as well as GSAMP. I believe that's the global experts on marine issues. Yes, and too many to mention, but we got some good feedback, and we're very proud of this final product, and we are going to, you know, share it widely when it is published. So we're going to ask everyone now to take out your cell phones, select your camera app, and scan the code on this slide, and you'll be able to download the Sargassum white paper. Feel free to share widely in your networks and give us any feedback that you have. And here is our information to contact us further. And this is the information for the Cartagena Convention Secretariat for any additional information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shelley and Anna Karima. And on behalf of the Cartagena Convention Secretariat, we do want to appreciate all of the effort that both of you have put in coordinating the development and the enhancement of this white paper. We also want to recognize the very many scientists and regional organizations that provided input and updates. I want to recognize the leadership role of our Regional Activity Center for SPOR based in Guadeloupe, who coordinate that working group that you made reference to. In the interest of time, I'm just going to hand straight over to Mahesh, who is going to, in even a shorter space of time, bring this all together. But again, I just wanted to say that it's been a pleasure to support this effort by UNEP headquarters and the GPA, and we look forward to the future collaboration. Over to you, Mahesh.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I wish we had more time for such a wonderful briefing on this white paper, and congratulate all our colleagues at the Cartagena Convention. But now, in terms of moving to our last segment for this webinar, I would like to request 3 colleagues to give an overview, their thoughts, their reflections from a global perspective, then from a West Africa perspective, and then from a wider Caribbean perspective, in terms of what they've heard, in terms of opportunities for collaboration and the way forward. Let's start with Henrik from IOC UNESCO. Over to you, Henrik.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. Yes, I think it's actually a very encouraging session, this one. I think there's so much progress. There is a lot of things going on every time we've had these webinars and also other events that have happened outside our forum here. It reflects that it's a very active field, and it's this tension field between those interested in the science, but also the management and also the opportunities, which I like very much, is in focus of the white paper. So if we see this where the Sargassum field is right now, then I would want in particular to focus at the opportunities that we all have that are given by the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. The Decade is not a funding mechanism. It's no low-hanging fruit that will automatically solve all our problems, but it is a very strong framework to raise major issues, to give them visibility, and thereby increase our chances to have that funding that we need. And in particular, because the Sargassum issue is not just science, it's not just management, it's not just problems, it's also opportunities. So we have this opportunity to bring together these many different stakeholders, because the key concept in the decade, what is being sought for and promoted, is co-design and co-delivery. So I think we have the best possible elements for that, both at regional level, but also for the interregional cooperation, complementing where competences are stronger in the Caribbean, in West Africa, and combine that, because some of the solutions to this can definitely be developed jointly, and then the application of it is probably more local or regional. But I think there is a huge opportunity here. It's not simple, easy to develop a large scale decade project, but I think there are so many competent partners here. So I'm very optimistic about that, and I hope we can pursue that together. So that would be my synthesis and my optimism for where we have come to with all the work that has been presented today.
Wonderful, wonderful, Henrik. Let's move on to Jack from the Abidjan Convention Secretariat. Your thoughts, Jack?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mahesh. For the way forward from the Abidjan Convention perspective, let's say we'll take it on two sides. The first one is the scientific perspective. There is a real need for knowledge sharing and transfer of technology on possible usage of Sargassum. We heard that from one of the webinar, the science side of the webinar. So a lot have been done in the Gulf of Mexico that can be shared. So collaborative research grants, for example, will be needed to address some of the challenges experienced in the communities, such as more training of more researchers on current technological knowledge on how to address Sargassum in all the area where needed. Then the other side, the stakeholder really needs supply of equipment that will make removal of the landed Sargassum, and also a supply of barricade and materials needed by them to face this issue, like provision of boat, vessel adequately equipped to harvest Sargassum before landing at the shore. So all this is possible through sub-regional research project, because of only one country cannot succeed. To tackle the Sargassum mitigation challenge, because at last we need really collaboration in development and execution of grant targets toward addressing the challenge. So availability of research scientists to participate in the collaborative research and allowing them to participate in short and long-term training programs. Our organization, the Abidjan Convention, can promote collaboration across the Atlantic within the partnership framework defined by both parties, setting up a sub-regional research project. Finally, the regional strategy document, talked about it earlier, and Paul Lamine also mentioned it. will be submitted to the countries for adoption during the next conference of parties, the COP13, which is delaying because of the COVID situation. But anyway, one of the decisions which will be submitted is concerning the Sargassum, but we are not moving yet to an additional protocol. Anyway, if you want to have a binding instrument, so we need to move to that direction and have something operational in our region. Thank you, Mahesh.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's very interesting. The next COP will actually have a decision on this. Let's move on to Lorna for the final word, including the congratulations for such a nice white paper and the efforts that have been there. Action already, as you mentioned. Over to you, Lorna.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mahesh. And I have to admit that I'm a little bit excited and proud as we close this fifth webinar. We have come so far. We have achieved so much together. And yes, we know that the road ahead is still relatively long. But I believe that I can only see opportunities going forward. Before I start, though, I would like to just mention a comment that from our Safe Ocean Working Group chair, who is in the webinar, and she wanted to put a comment in the chat, and for some reason she said she didn't think it was seen, but she said so far one of the two top picks for the Safe Ocean Working Group in the Caribbean as well, under the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, is Sargassum. And so the comment, I had taken note of the comment from the colleague in the Pacific regarding that. As one of the co-chairs of the Clean Ocean Working Group, this is an issue that we have also identified, and we will be trying to link with the Safe Ocean Working Group on how we can support the science in the region. We've heard a lot, and I don't want to go over it in any way, except to say that there's some key sectors that it's obvious that we still need to do some work on. Private sector, we're moving forward on technology. We've talked about the UN Decade, which is one of the global aspects. We have talked about linking national governments to local authorities, and I really commend our colleagues in Mexico for highlighting that, because that is something that I think is much more an issue for our larger countries within the Cartagena Convention. Our small islands don't have, most of them do not have local government. Jamaica does, but this is something that I think that we need to consider as we look at collaboration as well. I think that we are maturing as a truly global program, which is why we're talking about access to the United Nations Environment Assembly, with the issue of Sargassum. One of the key points that I would like to raise here is that I don't think, I may have missed it, but I don't think I've heard it yet in the webinar, and it is the issue of linking with the sustainable blue economy. And maybe that's why Letitia was here, for sure, because she's leading the sustainable blue economy process for UNEP. And a part of that initiative is the finance initiative. And I was part of a webinar this week where they were talking about some very innovative ways of financing nature, actions for nature. Insurance payments, for example, when damage is done, issues of Sargassum. So this is something that I think that we need to at least keep track of going forward. And some of the other investments that the possibilities that they've talked about. They even talked about bankable projects. And of course, all of these issues have been raised, how we scale up from small scale activities to commercial scale. And I think that the UNEP Finance Initiative would be able to support that as well. Shelley talked somewhat about the importance of the anecdotal evidence from different regions, and I encourage that we continue to move towards that. The issue of building capacity is something that I think both the Abidjan and the Cartagena Conventions secretariats are very strong in, and we are taking up the charge of continuing this capacity development. And so as I bring my comments to a close, I want to thank all of our partners and colleagues who have participated, not just today, but even in the work that has been done since 2011 in moving us towards this and in allowing us to have some very solid science even now, so that we're able to put a white paper together. And as the science and the funding and the private sector and the governments get together to move forward, we have a solid basis for advancement. And I would end, Mahesh, by just letting all of you know that our Conference of Parties of the Cartagena Convention, who will be looking at this white paper very closely, among other things, will be held from July 26th to 30th this year, next month, and we will have a pre-COP meeting from June 21st to 25th. It is imperative that all of the governments of the region participate, because we're dealing with some very important and critical issues, not just for nature, but for economies and for societies as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you so much, Lorna, for those reflections. Maybe I can request all the panelists to please turn on their videos for one final sort of group picture, if you may. But just to thank the audience, we have more than 120 people still on the call at the moment, which is amazing, and we've way run over time. We were supposed to end half an hour ago, but people are still so interested. So it's really been a very interesting, I think, webinar. We have reached out to over 3,000 people over the course of these 5 webinars, and the interest levels are continuing to rise. So it's kind of a bittersweet moment in the sense that this is the last of our joint webinars, but at the same time, as Shelley mentioned, we have some new products following up, coming very soon your way, like the new brief, the foresight brief on Sargassum, and then taking this forward possibly at the global level, as Lorna mentioned, with the UNIA resolution. We have the UN decade on ocean science in front of us, the decade on ecosystems restoration, and also the decade on SDGs. So all that put together, I think we are really well placed, and our actions in terms of science, in terms of policy, and how we mainstream this collaboration is really, I think, an exciting way to end this joint webinar. So with that, maybe we can just wave to the 120 people still on the call and say goodbye. Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.
Hi, everyone.
Goodbye, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Milka.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.